Woolworths Pick and Mix was basically the highlight of any British kid's Saturday from 1909 until 2008. Frank Woolworth brought this concept over from America and opened the first UK store in Liverpool. The idea was simple: grab a striped paper bag, fill it with whatever sweets you wanted, and pay by weight. You had hundreds of options spread across those iconic counters. Fizzy cola bottles, jelly babies, foam bananas, milk bottles, flying saucers, the lot. The ritual was sacred. You'd carefully select your favorites, maybe sneak a few extras in your pockets if you were feeling brave. When Woolworths shut its doors in 2008, over 800 stores closed and took this childhood tradition with them. The Beano launched in July 1938, following its sister paper The Dandy, which first appeared in December 1937. D.C. Thompson published both out of Dundee, and they became weekly reading staples every British kid waited for. Dennis the Menace arrived in 1951, drawn by David Law, and became the face of the whole operation. The Bash Street Kid started as When the Bell Rings in 1954, created by Leo Baxendale before getting their proper name in 1956. The formula was simple: playground pranks, dodging homework, tormenting teachers, and causing general mayhem. Every other strip ended with the slipper or cane landing on someone's backside, which was just standard comedy gold back then. These two comics defined what British kids found funny for generations. Spangles appeared in British shops around 1948, when sweets were still being rationed. These square-boiled sweets with rounded edges cost you just one ration token instead of two, which made them popular immediately. Each sweet came individually wrapped, and the packets featured retro lettering. The flavors were simple fruit ones like strawberry, blackcurrant, and orange. Mars discontinued them in 1984, briefly brought them back at Woolworths in '95, then they disappeared entirely. Opal Fruits were a different story because the actual sweets never vanished. When Mars renamed them Starburst in 1998 to match international branding, the chewy fruit squares stayed identical, but loads of people still mourn that original British name. British kids' telly in the 70s and 80s got properly weird, and Rainbow and Button Moon are prime examples. Rainbow started in 1972, featuring three characters living together: Zippy, a loud puppet with a zip for a mouth, George, a pink hippo, and Bungle, a bloke in a bear suit. Each episode revolved around some educational topic, but the domestic setup felt oddly surreal. Button Moon, which kicked off in 1990, took things even further. Mr. Spoon, literally made from a spoon, would blast off from Junk Planet in a baked bean tin rocket to visit Button Moon hanging in blanket sky. Once there, he'd have a gentle adventure, peer through his telescope, then head home. Every character and prop was kitchen utensils and household objects, creating a gloriously homemade atmosphere. From 1946 onwards, every British school kid was entitled to a third of a pint of milk each day, delivered in tiny glass bottles with silver foil tops. The milk would arrive at school in crates first thing in the morning, then sit there until break time. In winter, the bottles would freeze solid. In summer, they'd warm up nicely in the sun, sometimes splitting or curdling before you even got to them. You'd poke a waxed paper straw through the foil and drink it down whether you liked it or not. This all came to an end in 1971 when Education Secretary Margaret Thatcher scrapped free milk for kids over 7, earning herself the nickname Thatcher, the Milk Snatcher. The Blue Peter badge was introduced in 1963 and became one of the most coveted things a British kid could own. To get one, you sent something creative to the show: a drawing, a poem, a letter, anything interesting really. The badge was a white shield with a blue sailing ship designed by Tony Hart. If your work earned you one, you wore it with serious pride because it meant you were worth recognizing. There were different types: the blue one, a green for environmental stuff, an orange for competition winners. Best part was it got you free entry to over 200 attractions across Britain, museums, zoos, theme parks. The Chalet School books were a massive series of boarding school novels British kids, especially girls, read for decades. Eleanor Brent Dyer wrote 58 of them between 1925 and 1970. The series followed a girls' boarding school that started in the Austrian Tyrol but kept moving around Europe, eventually settling in Switzerland. The formula was simple: troublesome new girl arrives, gets reformed by classmates and teachers, becomes model pupil. The school taught in 3 languages, which made it more exotic than other boarding school series. It was the longest-running series of its type. In 6 months of 1967, publishers shifted nearly 200,000 copies. British Bulldog was a playground game that started in UK schools back in the 19th century. 1 or 2 kids stood in the middle as the Bulldogs while everyone else lined up at one end. When someone shouted British Bulldog, all the kids had to sprint across to the other side. The Bulldogs in the middle tried to tackle them properly, take them down to the ground, or lift them clean off their feet. If you got caught, you became a Bulldog yourself. The game got rougher as more Bulldogs joined in. By the 1990s and 90s, loads of schools banned it because kids kept getting injured, broken bones, concussions, scraped knees. This one was brutal, especially when bigger kids went after smaller ones. British kids in the 70s and 80s knew the Texan bar. This one was chewy nougat and toffee wrapped in chocolate, and the adverts showed a cartoon cowboy who'd escape capture because eating his Texan took so long, his captors fell asleep. They called it a mighty chew and weren't lying. The bar disappeared in 1984. Wagon wheels sparked an even bigger debate. Everyone swore they'd got smaller, and research proved them right. They shrunk 12% from 41 grams to 36. People still argue whether the biscuits shrank or our hands just got bigger, but the numbers settled it. The Broom Cupboard wasn't actually a studio. It was just what everyone called the BBC One announcer room at Television Centre. On the 9th of September 1995, Philip Schofield squeezed into this tiny space and introduced the first ever live children's programme Links on the BBC. The room was genuinely small, about the size you'd expect from its nickname, with a single camera that didn't move and a desk covered in buttons. Philip sat there with Gordon the gopher, and they'd fill the gaps between cartoons, reading birthday cards and chatting to callers. When Andy Crane took over in 1997, he brought Ed the Duck along and kept the same cramped setup going until 1994. Grange Hill was the original gritty British kids drama, breaking rules in the 70s and 80s by showing what school life actually looked like. Smoking, bullying, teenage pregnancy, drugs, all the stuff that made parents complain but kept kids watching. Biker Grove came along in 1989, set in a Newcastle youth club, and it went even further. The most famous episode was when character PJ got hit in the face with a paintball during a game and went permanently blind. It was brutal for tea time viewing, in my opinion. The Broadcasting Standards Council got involved after viewer complaints. 5 million people tuned in twice a week to see what drama would unfold at the Grove. In Britain, from 1975 to 90, if you were a kid learning to cross the road, you learned it from a bloke in a green superhero costume. The Green Cross Code Man was played by Dave Prowse, a bodybuilder who later became Darth Vader. The character could teleport anywhere children needed help crossing streets, teaching simple rules: stop at the curb, look around for traffic, listen and cross when safe. This replaced an older military-style drill deemed too confusing. Prowse's slogan was, "I won't be there when you cross the road, so always use the Green Cross Code." Edgar Wright, said Prowse, stopped a whole generation of kiddies from being mowed down. Tizer launched in 1924 as Pickup's appetizer and became known for its bright red colour and this vaguely citrus taste nobody could quite identify. The recipe stayed secret, but what you got was an aggressively fluorescent red drink that tasted like someone made orange soda from memory. Cremola foam worked completely differently. It came as coloured crystals in a small tin that you'd dissolve in cold water. When you stirred it in, the powder fizzed and foamed as acids reacted with sodium bicarbonate to create bubbles. It came in raspberry, orange, lemon and later cola flavours. Both were Scottish inventions that became British staples through the 70s and 80s before Nestle stopped making cremola foam in 1998. Play School had 3 windows built into the set, and each episode the presenter would ask which one you wanted to look through. You had the round window, the square window, and the arched window. The thing is, the choice wasn't random at all. If the theme was something circular, like wheels or balloons, you'd go through the round window. Boxes or houses meant the square window. The arched window barely appeared because you needed something like a fountain or an actual arch to justify it. Thousands of kids sat there guessing every day. not realizing the theme gave it away from the start. It was brilliant, really, making you think you had a choice when the whole thing was already decided. From the late 70s onwards, Panini sticker albums became an obsession for British school kids. These albums covered everything from World Cups to the Football League, and filling one was serious business. You'd buy packets of stickers for about 20 pence, tear them open hoping for something you actually needed, but mostly you'd end up with duplicates. These became your swaps, and the playground turned into a frantic marketplace where kids gathered calling out, "Got, need, got," as they tried to trade their way to completion. The real prize was landing a shiny, those metallic back stickers usually reserved for club badges or team photos. Finding that last elusive sticker to complete your album felt better than Christmas morning. If you were a British kid in the 1990s or 90s and your telly had a text button, you knew about CFAX. The BBC launched it in 1974 as the world's first teletext service, letting you access pages of information through your television. You'd punch in a 3-digit page number and wait a few seconds for blocky text to appear. Most people used it for news, sports scores, or TV listings, but kids went straight for the games. Page 170 had Bamboozle, a collection of puzzles you worked out on paper. ITV had their own version called Oracle from 1978. Corona soft drinks were a fixture across Britain from the early 1900s until the late 90s. Each week, a bright yellow Corona truck would roll down your street, and the driver, known as the Corona Man, would deliver crates of fizzy drinks to your doorstep. The bottles were glass and returnable, so you'd give back empties when the next delivery came and get a few pence. There were loads of flavours like lemonade, orangeade, cherryade, cream soda, and the more unusual dandelion and burdock, which tasted a bit like sarsaparilla. You could order by the dozen, and the Corona Man handled everything week in, week out, until the whole thing wound down in the late 90s. Billy Butlin opened the first proper holiday camp in Skegness in 1936 after a terrible boarding house stay where you had to clear off between meals and wander around in the rain. His idea was simple, one price for everything: food, bed, entertainment, the lot. You stayed in basic chalets and spent days at the pool or watching variety shows put on by redcoats, camp staff in bright blazers. Fred Pontin ran similar camps and both became massive in the 50s and 60s. The entertainment was wonderfully naff: knobbly knees competitions where blokes showed off their skinny legs, talent shows, bingo. It was all quite regimented, but families loved it because you didn't have to plan anything. Everything happened on site. Mr. Frosty was a white plastic snowman with the word Frosty printed across his chest in bright red. The telly adverts showed kids having a brilliant time cranking his back handle and serving up coloured slushies from the drawer in his belly. You wanted one desperately. The reality was rather disappointing. Ice cubes had to sit at room temperature for 30 minutes to soften up. Otherwise, they were far too hard to actually crush. Then you needed serious arm strength to turn that handle round and round whilst pushing firmly down on his hat. After all that grinding away, you'd open the drawer to find maybe 2 tablespoons of wet slush that started melting immediately. Conkers was the autumn schoolyard battle where everyone cheated. You'd pick up a horse chestnut from beneath the trees in late September, drill a hole through the middle, thread it onto a bootlace, and take on all challengers. The rules were simple. You took turns swinging your conker at the opponents, trying to smash theirs while yours stayed whole. A winning conker became a owner after one victory, a twoer after 2, and so on. But winning was really about preparation. Soaking your conker in vinegar overnight was the classic trick to harden it. Baking it in the oven for 10 minutes was just as popular. Both methods were officially banned, but that just meant you had to be sneaky about it. Why don't you just switch off your television set and go and do something less boring instead? Aired on BBC One from 1973 to 1995 during school holidays. Kids from different parts of Britain showed activities and tricks you could do instead of watching telly. The irony was obvious. Here you were sat in front of the TVV being told to switch it off and do something more interesting. But if you actually did that, you wouldn't be watching the show. Children would watch other kids making paper crafts or learning magic tricks, then just carry on watching more TV. It ran for 22 years, so clearly people kept tuning in to be told not to tune in. The bell for morning break brought an immediate stampede towards the tuck shop. You had about 15 minutes total, and if you were stuck at the back of the queue, you'd barely get served before the next bell went. Most schools had strict rationing in place, limiting you to 1 or 2 items per visit to keep the queue moving. The typical stock was penny sweets in jars, chocolate bars like Mars or Marathons, packets of crisps in 3 or 4 flavors, and fizzy drinks if you were lucky. Some kids would sprint the moment the bell sounded to secure their spot. The prefects often got to jump the queue entirely, which nobody thought was fair, but that's how it worked. These were plastic drinking straws packed full of tiny flavored beads that dissolved when milk flowed through them. You'd stick one into your glass of plain white milk to drink it. As you sipped, the beads would melt and turn it into chocolate or strawberry milkshake in your mouth. The original version, called Flav R straws, came out in America in 1956 and became massively popular with kids who refused to drink plain milk. They vanished in 1961 because they cost too much compared to pouring Nestlé Quick powder into your glass. Modern versions like Sipar and Milk Magic brought them back. Same idea, hundreds of little flavor pellets sealed inside a rigid straw that did the work as you sipped. Sunday tea time on the BBC was where families gathered before the school week rolled back around. This slot ran around 5 or 6 in the evening, catching everyone after tea but before bedtime. The BBC filled it with costume dramas and adaptations of children's classics, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Box of Delights, Tom's Midnight Garden. These were proper period pieces with Victorian settings, elaborate costumes, and careful historical detail, but aimed squarely at younger viewers and their parents watching alongside. Production values were surprisingly high. The shows gave kids something worthwhile to watch while keeping adults entertained too, bridging the gap between weekend relaxation and Monday morning reality with nights' magical wardrobes and time-traveling gardens.